Welcome to the B2B CMO podcast, a show for marketing executives who are redefining what it means to be a strategic leader. I'm John Miller.
And I'm Sydney Sloan. Between us, we've led marketing orgs at companies like Marketo, which John founded, Demandbase, G2, and SalesLoft. For more marketing leadership resources, you can visit b2bcmoproject.com. And now, let's get into the show. Welcome to the B2B CMO podcast. Good morning. I'm Sydney Sloan. I'm joined by my co-host, John Miller. Hi, John.
Hello.
Our guest today has spent her career creating new market categories. Yes, she's like a phenomenal category creator and helping companies dominate them. So Jennifer Johnson, known affectionately as JJ, has been a CMO for more than a decade, building high-performing teams from some of the most trusted names in cybers, like super cyber specialist. So she took Amplitude and Tenable public as their CMO, led Coverity to an acquisition, and today she is the chief marketing officer at one of the world's largest cybersecurity companies, CrowdStrike. It might be the largest. It's an agentic security platform built to secure the AI revolution. JJ thinks a lot about bold storytelling, category leadership, and lately how AI is shaping marketing's new operating model. So we're going to talk about all those things. Welcome, JJ, to our podcast. And congratulations on being a top 100 B2B CMO.
Well, thank you very much, John and Sydney. Always a pleasure. Happy to be here. Excited to be here.
Good.
Thrilled to have you here.
Friday morning and end of a very long week. So we always like to kick off with some fun questions to get to know you a little bit better. And so we'll start with, you've been a multi-time CMO, extremely successful. We all look up to you. What is your CMO origin story? Like, how did you get into marketing, and what would you name your superpower to be?
I always tell people that, I want to be able to say that I had this grand vision, from the beginning that I was going to be a CMO, but it just kind of happened, right? And so I started my career in product marketing, and I always say great CMOs come from everywhere, but I'll make the case for why great CMOs come from product marketing is, especially in tech, right? You have to be able to kind of sit between product and engineering, especially, being able to be technical, to be able to tease out the technical messaging and synthesize it into a bold narrative and a story. And I think that, really is being, kind of that hub that sits between product and eng and the go-to-market and the customer. Number one, you kind of have that skill set of being able to take technology and turn it into a narrative, number one. Number two, I think you get a pretty 360-degree view of the business and the lens of the customer. And that background, I think, was suited me well to kind of move into the CMO seat. So I always advocate great CMOs come from everywhere, but I'm always going to give a shout out to those product marketers turned CMO. I just wound up, actually my predecessor at Coverity is a gentleman named Dave Peterson. So when he left to go start Play Bigger, for those of you marketers, you might know and have read the Play Bigger book on category design, which I wound up working with them at some point in my career. But when he left to start Play Bigger, the CEO came into my office one day and said, go move to the other office. And I all of a sudden found myself in the seat. So, I think I don't think there's any magic to it, right? Like, do a good job, work hard, be a great collaborator, stay, keep your nose to the grindstone, like ear to the customer, always customer first. And, I think those are just the basic things that I think we as marketers do inherently. But I just kept doing a great job and wound up in that seat. I've been to CMO, as you mentioned, a few times now. And when I left Coverity, I went to Andreessen Horowitz for a bit of time, and I got that experience of being on the VC side for a year, which was fantastic. Getting to see, and pattern match across a whole host of portfolio companies. Met Tanium through that. Went into to be Tanium CMO, and really put them on the map. They were a systems management company that really entered the market in cybersecurity. That's actually not how they built the company, but there was this great product market fit for cyber. So they kind of came out of nowhere. And that was my first big moment of kind of taking a company from almost overnight obscurity to, at the time, the hottest security company on the planet, because CrowdStrike was still coming out of stealth.
Yep.
And And then had a great run after that. As you said, took a couple companies public. I just really love cybersecurity. I love the mission driven nature of cybersecurity, and it's always been so critical. And now in this, of course, this world of AI and securing AI and what AI is going to do from a pace of attack standpoint, as well as kind of a new nature of cyber risk, there's never been a more important moment to be in cyber. So I really love being in it, and I also take a lot of both pride and feel responsible for not creating more noise in the market, but helping to actually provide some clarity in the market for these defenders who are out there every day keeping all of us safe. So I said I wanted to stay in cyber, and I want to be the best CMO I can be in the best, biggest cybersecurity company that I can, and well, here we are. And I've loved every minute of the last almost 4 years.
Great story. I think one thing that I find interesting about your background is that it seems like you wanted to be a marketer almost from the very beginning. I mean, you studied marketing in college. We've had some other CMOs on this podcast recently who came to it from a completely, all sorts of different directions, whether it's like psyops for the military or science backgrounds. So I think one of the lessons is you can get to be a CMO from any kind of background. But I'm curious, like, little JJ growing up, did you knew you wanted to be a marketer from the beginning?
I think I inherently knew what I knew about marketing was it was, from a young age. Like, obviously I didn't know the kind of the academic part of it, but I understood that it was about telling stories and storytelling, which I've always loved storytelling, even as a little girl. Like being close to the customer and understanding the customer. I was a psychology minor, so I was a marketing major in college and a psychology minor. So, getting in the minds and understanding the motivations. And I've always, been someone that, I think has a high EQ and can read the room, so to speak, and really understands kind of almost the unwritten, part of doing our job, the art. And I just have always loved, I've loved creativity and design, even you can probably see my office behind me. This is not a fake background. Everyone asks me if it's fake. I love design. And I think that, you put all those things together, and, those are a lot of the kind of the backbones of what we do in marketing, is telling our story through, the spoken and the unspoken, right? And building a brand and building affinity and building community. And so I think all of those things were instilled for me as a young girl at a young age, that kind of just, I think, inherently charted my path, maybe without me even knowing.
Yeah. And storytelling ties so well to the product marketing background, that you happen. The best product marketers I've met are the best storytellers. So moving on, I mean, we started the whole B2B CMO project in the first place, because I just think this role has gotten harder and harder in the last, 10 years, and obviously even harder now with AI. And you've done it, kind of, so many times through the years. I'm curious, what feels harder for you today than it has in the past?
I think it's less about the function of marketing in terms of kind of the outward. I think it's, for me, more about how do we drive this transformation internally with AI, right? And we talk, like, I think one of the main skills is, as being a CMO versus maybe a VP of marketing, is really thinking about transformation, right? And that could be transformation around transforming your market category. That also could be transformation internally. And I think we're at this moment of internal transformation, maybe since we haven't seen since the days of when Marketo, John, came to be, right? Is we're going through this era of how do you bring AI in to transform how you actually work as marketing. And, being at a company that's not AI native, right? I mean, there's many things we do as CrowdStrike that we've always moved fast. We've always, had a pulse on the customer. We've always been able to kind of be the leader in whatever we're doing, but we're still we've got a large at scale marketing organization. And how do we simultaneously, it's like building the plane while you're flying it, right? On steroids. And I think that's the biggest challenge that I've seen. And I know every every CMO, regardless of the scale and stage of the company, is struggling with this. But I think the at scale companies is how do we actually build AI in and transform our teams, what the skill sets that are required, how we get work done, the workflows, how do we agentify while we're actually trying to run the business. As I'm sure you're hearing from all the CMOs you talk to, it's probably the number one issue that all of us are facing right now.
Can you share? I met your AI transformation leader at our AI club a couple months ago. I think it was one of the first times that I heard like the background of the person that you chose to hire and the remit that you gave him. So would you share that with the audience? Because I think it's a little bit unique.
Yeah. So, number one, I think every CMO needs to have someone in their leadership team that is accountable for driving AI transformation. And so I looked for somebody who understands marketing. I think they need to understand marketing, but I actually looked for someone that came from a strategic consulting background. So I brought in someone from Boston Consulting Group, from BCG, who's worked in their go-to-market practice, working with many companies of all different sizes and scales around their AI transformation. So I wanted someone that could come in who understood enough about the function, but actually understood the process and the change management side of driving the transformation, not just the kind of the technology piece of it. So I think it's important who you bring in and kind of bringing in that skill set that I would always, if you can find someone who understands marketing, who also understands consulting, I think that's the winning combination.
And it's a 18-month remit? Or did I hear that, or did I read that wrong?
No, I mean, the person he's here, he's actually an employee. I actually brought him over from BCG to join the team, and we're building a team around him. So we have forward deployed marketing engineers that we're actually bringing into the team underneath him to actually go and be able to rapidly prototype and build out these workflows. And so what we're doing right now is we're mapping out all of our functions and our intra-function workflows, and then our cross-marketing workflows. And we're actually putting in roadmaps of how we're actually going to get from A to B. So, I mean, just your typical transformation journey. Now, we can say that's a 3-year roadmap, but in reality, I mean, there's 1 week sprints within that 3-week roadmap. So it's pretty amazing, though, what you can do when you get the right team in place and you just get them. I think the biggest thing is it's easy to, when you look across everything that could be agentified in marketing, it's easy, I think, to get overwhelmed pretty quickly. Pick one thing and actually do it end to end and do it well. Learn from that, build a playbook, and then you can replicate it out. I think people just need to think about it probably in chunks is the best way to get from here to there.
Where does he fit in your org structure? How did you do any other org design to support bringing somebody like this in?
Yeah, so he's a direct report to me, part of the marketing leadership team. He has a team underneath him that he's got someone that's kind of running the process and change management and enablement piece. So they're doing a lot of the, tool enablement, change management enablement within the team. We're building these forward deployed engineers to actually be able to work with the functional teams in marketing as well as our IT team and make sure that we're, deploying, if we're doing a Claude Code workflow to, right now we're looking at our end-to-end campaign workflow as an example, that we're building out the right process and we're actually, we're automating it and agentifying it in phases, and then working very, very closely with the functional leaders. So, for example, this is a central team, right? And so we still have, for example, obviously we have product marketers and product marketing team. Each of the functions, for example, product marketing now has an AI champion in their team. Brand has an AI champion in their team. All the demand gen functions have AI champions. And so we've kind of built this center of excellence. They're the center of excellence. That's probably the best way to describe it. And then they're working with all of the champions in each one of these functions.
So the AI champions are in the functions.
Yes.
Got it. One more follow-up to that, and then we'll back to Sydney. What about the relationship to marketing operations? Because I feel like a lot of people put AI into marketing operations, and it doesn't usually work. So I'm curious kind of how you thought about that.
Marketing ops is a key stakeholder to this, but at least in our organization, they're extraordinarily talented at the tech stack and building the tech stack to enable it. But they may not, and this is not a shortfall of our team. Our team is amazingly talented, but sometimes they don't always think of business objective down and the process and the change management. I think people can't underestimate the change management and the cultural shift that you have to make as an organization. And I think marketing ops plays a key role in enabling that. But I believe at least you need a function that actually can kind of drive that process and change and cultural change.
Yeah, they're just looking at it from at a different altitude,
100%.
right? When you're hands in the, in the center of the process, it's hard to see up above, which is why you have it reporting to you,
Yep.
because you can see that and lead there. I want to go back to one of the things, by the way, that hits to our pillar number 5 on org design, because it's an area that pillar 5 in our research, because it's an area that the CMOs that responded to our survey felt the least ready to tackle. So that's helpful for us to go deep on that area, because we're all still learning how to transform. And I think a lot of people have done like okay, we're going to enable everybody how to use a tool, but the whole we're going to redesign the way that we actually work is a massive difference. And I think there's just everybody on the spectrum. I'm in a role now too as an EIR, so I get to see across 25 portcos what they're at, and the spectrum is so wide. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is just staying alert and staying aware and observe what's happening in the org, because I'll learn something or I'll observe something new every week that kind of keeps evolving our thinking, right? And so we have this central team, but that also doesn't mean there isn't great innovation and great work happening in the functions themselves, right? And so, for example, one of my product marketing leaders just built this marketing intelligence dashboard, which is like a real-time listening agents and they're scraping all this data, and then they're creating this real-time dashboard where they can basically tell you this topic is surging. There's an agent then that will auto generate a first draft of content. You need to bid higher on these keywords. I mean, it's unbelievable what this person created. Now, that wasn't driven out of this central team, but that doesn't mean that great work can't happen. So I think you have to be very aware of where the work is happening and who the leaders are that are just naturally intellectually curious and kind of bringing those things to the surface and then connecting the dots. But I mean, it's the transformation that we're undertaking right now, which we are still in the early innings, as we all know. It's phenomenal to watch. So we should be, I know it's challenging, but I think we should also feel lucky that we're, able to actually be part of this, this, quite frankly, once in a generation, transformation.
So another area, and I think it goes back to the whole product marketing. And I grew up in product marketing too. So I'm with you on that. And I wonder sometimes, I'm like, is that having the product marketing background, is that one of the areas that helps you become more strategic? Because we're trained to look at the market lens first and talk to product and bring in outward inputs into the strategic process. So I'm curious, as at the leadership level. So we've talked a lot about you leading marketing, but at the C-suite, how do you think about what it means to be a strategic leader? And maybe give us one example of the hardest thing that you had to do in the past year that you wanted to make happen. And how did you convince the rest of the C-suite it was the right thing to do?
I mean, strategic CMOs, I think by definition are transformational. So all of the things that we just talked about, I think part of that is thinking about the market, not just the marketing, right? We've talked a lot about that in CMO groups about there's this chief market officer, and that takes different forms, but it's really how looking at the market, where the market's going, evolving the market, building categories. I think all of that's part of a strategic CMO. I think you can look at any part of marketing and there's a more of an operational, I hate saying tactical, but more of an operational side to it and more of a strategic side to it. You can look at lead gen and think, MQLs, or you could look at lead gen and think pipeline and revenue, right? I think it's just the lens in which you approach it and how you represent yourself and your function at the C-suite level that really, that dictates that. Now, I will say that, everyone wants to be a strategic CMO, right? At the end of the day, the majority of what we do still is operational, and you need to be over execution. And so I think that's the one thing that I always say, is everyone wants to be the person that is defining the strategy, and you have to be able to sit there and define, you have to be part of the strategy definition, but you also have to make sure that your team is executing on it. And, that is making sure that you yourself are over the details, making sure you have leaders that are over the details. The details matter a lot. And that's something that we stress a lot at CrowdStrike is, not just doing the big things well, because we do the big things really, really well, but also making sure that all those little details, because all those little details matter. And I think as CMOs, it's not micromanaging, but I think we have to find a balance of being able to kind of go broad and also go deep at the same time. And I think that's the biggest challenge. I think that CMOs and I do think you can't just be strategic if you're not going to be operational. That's my point of view.
The execution earns you the right to be strategic.
Bingo.
A line that I've heard is pipeline is permission, right? So if you're not delivering on the core numbers, you don't have the credibility to then go bring in these sort of bigger, broader, strategy. So, I mean, I think that makes total sense. Related to this, though, a little bit is something that I've also heard called as, the CMO tax, which is, in many ways, the CMOs, we're really the only C-suite that I think constantly has to be justifying the value of our role and our function to the rest of the C-suite. Do you feel anything like that? And what works for you to be establishing kind of marketing as an equal member of the C-suite?
So to what you just said, I couldn't agree with it more. So I was actually on a panel yesterday. It's interesting that this question, and it was around thought leadership. And the question was around thought leadership, and the question was, how do you justify the value of your thought leadership to your CFO? And I was on a panel with 3 other CMOs, all esteemed colleagues, and I was the last one on down the row to answer the question, and not one of them said pipeline, which I was actually kind of floored about, right? And like that was very simply like the buck stops with pipeline and revenue. And so, there's KPIs, of course, that we measure around brand awareness and brand sentiment, and all of that matters a lot. But at the end of the day, if you're not doing it in the spirit of driving revenue, then like we're growth companies, right? And so to me, pipeline is permission. It is the number one metric, the number one KPI, the number one thing I talk about at our board meetings. Everything else is done in the spirit of building a category for the sake of building a category. Well, you're doing it obviously to drive leadership and revenue as a result of it. So I was actually surprised at that.
That is crazy, and I'm gonna tease John onto a soapbox. This is gonna be fun. This is not in our script, because you just mentioned that you talk about pipeline at the board meeting. Do you talk about all pipeline, and then I'll let John follow up on like the metric side of that he's so passionate about?
Yeah, I mean, I keep it at a high level. Obviously, they're not. They don't want to go down into the details, but I mean, do we have good is our pipeline health good, solid? We look at things in the lens of, are we driving new customer acquisition? Are we effectively and efficiently expanding our install base? And platform consolidation is a big part of our strategy, making sure that we're looking at it through both lenses. So we actually have broken out 2 different funnels now. So before we used to have one blended funnel that was everything. Now we actually look at everything in the context of new customer acquisition and expansion. And I would say that's another thing that I would encourage CMOs to do, because when you blend it, we know the story here. The natural tendency is it's if you're just looking at I put $1 in, what's the most effective, ROI on the other side? Of course, it's going to be expansion because they're existing customers already. And so you're going to make potentially sub-optimized decisions if you're looking at things from a blended point of view. So I always talk just in general about how are we doing on new customer acquisition? What are the levers that are actually moving the needle? If we're getting stuck, where are we getting stuck and why? Is it a market problem? Is it an execution problem? What are we doing about it? I mean, that's really kind of where I keep that level of the altitude.
I love that you separate the pre and post sale. What Sydney was getting at a little bit is, are you trying to sort of do marketing sourced pipeline versus sales sourced, marketing influenced?
Yes. So yes, we have marketing, we have sales, we have our partner alliances, and our sales development team is also a channel because they're predominantly an outbound motion. So we have actually all 4. as contributors. So when we build our pipeline targets, we build targets, and we have it now for both new customer and expansion, and we have targets at each one of those contribution sources, and we're measuring that every week. So I do report on that at the board at a high level, but that's something that I'm looking at every single week, reporting on it every single week, and if there's something that's off, we can proactively address it. But then source versus influence, kind of the next phase of this, right? And that's a tricky one, right? Because you've got multi-touch attribution. That's been a little controversial in our organization of, how effective is it? I'd love your perspective on it. What are our organizations kind of leaning out from things like MTA?
This is Sydney brings it up because it obviously is controversial and it's varied across a lot of companies. There's a lot of desire from CFOs to be able to point to, well, this is marketing sourced versus this is sales sourced, so that they can make allocation decisions, right? But at least I firmly believe that buying is way too complicated to try to attribute it to any one touch. It's complex, it's nonlinear, it's the conversations in the dark communities you can't see. It's increasingly the AEO, AI chats, right? So yeah, so an SDR prospects into an account that tries to create something. What is the first thing that recipient of that email does? They go type that company into the AI engine to see, is this worth their time? So if you show up on the AI search, then the SDR gets a response, right? Is that marketing source, sales sourced? I don't know. So, it sounds like your top level number is the total pipeline.
Yes.
And then you report on that, but then you at least are trying to get to that next level of detail with multi-touch attribution, which may or may not be valuable.
It's not perfect. It's not perfect, but it's better than, to your point, it's better than not having anything. And marketing, to your point, marketing influence is 100% of the
better.
Absolutely,
better.
right? Especially the part we can't see and we can't track because it's before they even engage with us, right? And even then, there's probably hundreds of touch points between the first touch and them becoming a customer.
I'm seeing and recommending that people go back to self-reported attribution, right? Because I think in the psychology of the person, that's super interesting. Like, where did they go? And even though we can track almost everything, I don't think we can anymore, right? We thought we could, but we can't. So just asking them, I think, is super important. And because that's where you then want to double down. Okay, if this is where they went, then we want to make sure that we're owning that channel and we're optimizing that channel and, continuing to do more and more. The rest of attribution is just to help justify like your ROI and your spend and make sure that you've got your channel mix right, in my opinion, not for claiming credit. I agree with you. Like, it should be 100% across the board.
Yeah, and we're unified as a go-to-market leadership team. Like, our CRO will be the first one to say, like, he's less worried about if it's coming from marketing or sales or alliances. As a company, we're either hitting the pipeline number or we're not. And if we're not, we all need to come together as a go-to-market team, not as sales or marketing or alliances, and figure out how we're going to close the gap. Right. And so I think if you start with that lens, is we're just, it's one number, it's one company, and how are we going to achieve it as a go-to-market function, right? And I think that's the way to look at it.
I wish 2 companies ago, oh my gosh, it was just like we had the 4 functions. And when one was underperforming, they looked to me and we're like, you need to go make up the difference. And it was just such an unhealthy environment of like who sources what, and the accountability, and it just like the whole team spirit there is a critical piece to it, just to enjoy your job.
So back to like marketing influences everything. I mean, brand is in the air, right? Like by definition, brand is affecting our buyers' emotions and psychologies in a way that touches every single deal. But obviously, it's just notoriously hard to measure. It's hard to track. So, how are you making that case to your CFO for brand investments? Are you increasing it? How does that fit for you?
Yeah, I mean, well, we look at awareness, aided and unaided. We have sentiment measures that we track. We have, a survey we put out every 6 months on, AI leadership, trust. So there's a whole series of things that we use to measure, which does help. But I think at the end, we have an understanding across the C-suite, including the CFO, on investments in brand like that, I've never had to sit in front of my executive team and justify why we need to do brand, right? Maybe I'm in a luxury position, but I think there's an inherent understanding that, if we work in a trust industry, right? If we're doing all the right things to build the community and build the trust and get the credibility and the expertise, it's going to translate downstream, right? We did a Super Bowl ad, right? You could say that's a waste of money. And I would say that, based on how we measured it, but I know you can't directly link it. I mean, I think there's tools out there that say you can, but I know you can't directly link it to I saw a Super Bowl ad and therefore, my deal size increased by X, but you can see it in the data, right? We have done A/B testing on if someone has been exposed to the spot on digital, or what is their conversion rate. So, I mean, we've done some kind of cause and effect things where we can kind of track it, but we know that it actually worked for us. Falcon is our big user conference. You could say that's a big brand moment for us, which is also you can directly tie that back to
the pipeline
and sales. And so I think looking at, you kind of can't look at these things in silos anymore, right? But I also have an executive team that really understands and appreciates the value of brand, and everyone understands the value of our brand.
Yeah, I don't think that's luck though, right? I think, you as the CMO have created that executive trust. Any tips for other CMOs on kind of how you can create that and make that happen?
Look, I think to your earlier point, pipeline is permission, right?
Okay.
And I think if you show that you have the right strategy, the right plan, you are executing and you are providing results, right, on the things that you can directly attribute, then I think you get permission to do some of these other things. I think also, some of it is just the community sentiment. Like, I hate to say it, but some of it is, we ran a Super Bowl spot and we had customers and partners and employees, sending notes to our executive team saying, I've never been more proud to be a CrowdStrike customer than today. Yeah, you can't measure that, but that matters. And that matters a lot. And when, the team can kind of feel that, I think there's and you can foster that and make sure that everyone kind of feels that themselves. I think that helps. I think something like Falcon is that's a physical manifestation of everything that makes our brand and our community what it is. And so I think those things are just, those are easy because you can, it's visceral, you can feel it. Right. But I think a lot of it is just being able to, again, do the things that matter, the table stakes that matter, like pipeline generation, and be able to get people to feel the impact of doing some of these kind of more, I don't want to say touchy-feely. We were on the Sphere. This is another good example. At Falcon last year, we did an activation on the Sphere. And we were one of the, not the first, but we were one of the first B2B brands to actually we were definitely the first in cybersecurity to do an activation. And I will tell you, the amount of engagement on social, the amount of people who were like, this is the most, it just provides and we know this, it just provides a halo for your brand. And people want to be associated with the company that does these, cool things. And they want to be associated with the brand that is, leading the way, especially in something that's in cybersecurity that's so purpose-driven and mission-driven. People want to be associated with the leaders that are actually charting the path forward. So it's a statement for all of cybersecurity, not just for us as CrowdStrike when we do those kind of things.
One more practical follow-up on this. So, we're not that far away from budgeting season when you're going to be working on the 2027 budget. First of all, how do you make the case for your marketing budget overall? And do you split it out between brand and demand? And how do you make that justification?
Yeah, so we do. So the first thing is kind of a people versus program. So that's kind of the first thing that I'm measuring. And I think now given AI, we need to look at where we can continue to drive efficiencies, right? And that's not a decrease the team size. Maybe it's more of we're going to repurpose the team to other areas of the team, right? Or we're going to find ways to implement AI to kind of flatten the hiring curve. That's probably more of the goal over there. And then on the program side, it's looking at, yeah, I kind of view the world as brand, and then all things brand and all things revenue marketing. So brand and demand are kind of the two big. I mean, there's analyst relations, there's some other things, but those are kind of the two big buckets. And for the demand side, I mean, we have a very it's a very quantitatively based kind of top down and bottom up analysis that we do to get to what we think is what we believe is the directional right answer and how much pipeline is going to come out the other side. I'm sure it's everything that every other CMO does. And then we look at, what do we want to do from a brand perspective, and we kind of bring those two things together. And then there's always a little bit of, like tweaking from that point forward. But what I don't want to ever do is say, give demand the first pass, and then whatever's left, give it to brand. So I don't operate that way, because I think you're going to make sub-optimized decisions on the brand side. So I always have my two leaders go build their plans. I mean, we have the strategic imperatives. They go build their plans off of that and their asks, and then we continue to refine from there. But I wouldn't say give everything to demand and then whatever is left over, give it to brand.
So one of the things you said, like, you hope that the efficiency from AI will help flatten maybe the hiring curve. Another way that I've been hearing people talk about it is just, it's accelerating the speed and the challenge going back to your product marketing team. And even when you think about your like big launch moments and lightning strike activities, when product has accelerated their ability to deliver faster, like, how do you think about that particular area? I worry about it, right? Like, it's great that if you build all these things, but if the customers don't know about it, if your salespeople aren't enabled on it, like, then it's just code for the sake of code. And have you had to adapt there yet too for your teams? And how do you think about still making sure that there's those lightning strike opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, we have this saying in CrowdStrike, there's the calendar and the stopwatch, and we like to live on the stopwatch, right? And so I'm going to equate that to marketing in this case, right? There are things that are predetermined. We have a fall release, we have a spring release, as an example to your question, right? Those are what I would call the calendar moments, right? We time them to, big events happening, whether it's RSA, whether it's Falcon, and we know those are rallying moments, and those are cross-platform moments, right? So those are just kind of natural gravitational pulls for those two big things. Now it's everything that happens in between is the hard part. I think those are the more straightforward pieces. How do you actually manage all the things in between, especially when we have a platform that is 30 something modules now? If you equated that to market categories, it's probably 7 or 8 different market categories. And so that is the biggest challenge that we have, to be honest, as a marketing organization, is that we have to lead with the platform, because the platform is where the battle is being fought, right? So we always have to lead with our platform, but we still have to simultaneously go deep into the categories. Like cloud is an example, right? Identity is another example, because in every one of those categories, you have discrete competitors that's all they do. So, cloud could be one of 32 things we do versus someone like, our competitors in this space, that's all they do. So you have to be able to go deep. So what we've done is we've created these bigger platform moments that are probably more the calendar side. And then the product categories are more of like the stopwatch side, where we have what I call rapid offense plans. I don't like rapid response. I like rapid offense. And so we look at what's trending in the market, right? Like what signals we're getting from conversations, what competitor moves are happening. We're using that to inform our content marketing strategy. And we're being able to kind of put that out in a rapid offense manner, with whether it's on social or digital, like creating webinars, doing all kind of the demand gen elements. We kind of package things together at more of like every month we do a customer newsletter, right? Because they can't, that's kind of also hard. It's a balance. I can't sit here and say that we've perfected it, to be honest, because I don't think any at scale large platform company can tell you that they've perfected it. It's always something we're going to struggle with, is how do you continue to like make sure that we're getting enough visibility and awareness, and that our sales team knows how to pitch all the things coming. Our customers know that it's out there, but also can consume it. Like it's a non-trivial challenge, I will say, but we're trying to kind of balance both. So calendar and stopwatch is kind of where I'm landing on this. Yeah. Yeah.
So we like to end with gratitude because we know none of us could have gotten where we are without the people who gave us the shot, supported us. I know you have a lot of fans, so I'm really curious who you would like to share gratitude towards.
I love this part of it. That's really lovely that we're doing this. There's many, but if I were to pick like three, I'd say the first is Michelle Feaster. So Michelle, I worked for Michelle at Mercury and HP in product marketing. And I think everyone in their career has that person that like maybe saw something in them that they didn't see, or gives you the confidence to kind of push yourself to a place where you wouldn't have done it on your own. And she really did do that for me. And she kind of just pushed me out on the stage, so to speak. And she was a great advocate and a great cheerleader. And I learned a ton from her. And she really did change the trajectory of my career. And I couldn't ever thank her enough for that. Dave Peterson is probably another one. He was a colleague of mine. I worked for him at Coverity. I worked with him again as Playbigger. He's definitely the best storyteller that I've ever met in my life. Outside him and Christopher Lockhead are probably the two. And just been a really good, you always need those people that help you, you can bounce ideas off them. They're your thought partners. We have very complementary skill sets. And so like I would work with him 10 times over again. And I think he helped me shore up maybe some of the areas where I wasn't as strong over my career. And I'd say the third, and it was the CEO of Tenable, Amit Uran, who unfortunately passed away last year. But he was just a phenomenal person, and he was my biggest cheerleader and my biggest fan. He was hands-on enough, but not in the sense of he trusted you to do your job. And that was probably one of the most, outside of CrowdStrike, that was the most rewarding experience of my whole career, because we were able to go and build a category that now the whole market, exposure management, that started with Tenable, and the whole market uses it now in cyber. And we took a company public, and he was just a wonderful human being that lifted everyone up. And everyone needs someone like Amit. And for those who were able to know him, like they understand where I'm coming from. So, those are just three. I could 20 more.
And I'm sure you've done that, I think, at this point too in our careers, like us being able to see that in others and pay that forward is also such the rewarding part. I mean, we've been doing this a long time, and you can like see it and put people in the right roles. So I'm sure you've done that for many. Well, we are at the end, and I want to do a quick wrap up of all the things I learned. I could spend another hour because it was so insightful and interesting. But I think you are one of the most strategic CMOs that I know, and what you shared in terms of coming at it from a consultative and transformational mindset, like having that big picture of where you want the company to go, how do you shape the markets, and then how do you bring the team along to execute on that vision is part one. The second thing I loved that you said, and John said it too, is pipeline is permission. So you have to get that right, and reporting on it, understanding all the different various sources, and being able to do that consistently well will give you permission to make those investments in other things and build the trust that allows you to take some of those fun risks. And then the last area that we touched on was the idea of the clock and the stopwatch. And I do think that is something that people have to have in mind. We still need the big crowd, like the lightning strike moments, in being able to like make a statement in the industry and finding those points in time, and in order to do that and build the brand and do the big fun things that your customers and prospects can like look towards. We still need those moments, but we also need to figure out how to act at the speed of which the market is shaping and shifting. And so the clock, the calendar versus the stopwatch is that one. So thank you so much, JJ, for being here and taking the time. I know you're a very, very busy person. For those of you that are listening, if you want to hear more and learn more, please go to the B2BCMOproject.com. There are more podcasts with amazing CMOs sharing their secrets and stories. There's our custom research and our manifesto. If you'd like to join, if you're at scale CMO, we are building a community of folks like JJ where we learn together because there is no playbook for what we're doing right now. And so we have to share our stories and our learnings, and together as a community, we will be able to tackle this transformation of our lifetime. So thanks, JJ. Thanks, John. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the B2B CMO podcast. Head on over to b2bcmoproject.com for more episodes, plus the latest research and frameworks CMOs need, not just to survive, but actually thrive as AI and the new playbook reshape how we go to market. And if this episode sparks something for you, please follow the show, leave a rating, and share it with a marketing leader who could use a little inspiration. Special thanks to our wonderful partners, OneMind, 2X, Check, Demandbase, G2, Goldcast, LinkedIn, Fave, Sendoso, and Webflow for making this podcast possible. Until next time, be safe out there.